Okay, so we are going to start. We are still waiting for our dean, the vice dean that may appear later on, but the audience is already there. So I would like to welcome you all. The session will be in English. We are having here in the room Robert Meyer from Ubiquity University, and we have on screen Jim Garrison, the CEO of Ubiquity University, on the left, down on the left. Up on the left, we do have Peter Merry, who is going to bring us into what is Ubiquity University and what courses we can join. And we do have Diane on the right. She also is part of Ubiquity University, and she will also be able to answer questions later on. And this is also our audience here in Portugal. So I welcome you all to this international session. So by the way, Jim is in California, Peter is in the Netherlands, right? And Diane is in Tunisia, and we are in Portugal, so it's really a global forum. So I welcome you all, and perhaps I would ask Jim to say some words about Ubiquity University. We are going to have a schedule. Jim will present a bit as he is the CEO of Ubiquity University, and then Peter Merry will introduce us deeper into it, and then we will have an opportunity to ask questions. Okay, so Jim, we are listening. Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for joining us.
Well, thank you, Paula, and thank you all in the audience for being present. It's a pleasure to have a global conversation from Portugal to California to the Netherlands to Tunisia. It's a real statement just in how we're meeting, where the world has arrived in terms of a global village. And it's a privilege, Paula, to spend a few minutes of your time at this conference to talk about Ubiquity University, because we have been working for many years to design what we're calling a whole new kind of education for a whole new kind of world. And what we mean by that is that in our view, the world is changing very dramatically and very fundamentally. It's clear that we're entering a world of hypercomplexity in which little events anywhere can have major impacts everywhere, across sectors and across continents. We're in a world of escalating climate change. We're in a world in which global forces at the level of our economics and our political economies are radically altering the landscape. There in Europe, for example, over the last several weeks, you've been inundated by refugees coming out of the Middle East and North Africa. And those migrations of refugees are only going to escalate over the coming years. And that's just one of the challenges that the global community is facing. So we need a whole new kind of education, in our view, to prepare our young people, quite literally, for the world that is coming. And so over the last 10 years, but most specifically over the last 3.5 years, we've been seeking to design an educational system that would, in the first instance, address itself to an increasingly hyper-complex world, but also in terms of the design of the educational operating system itself, would offer young people all the skills they need in relationships to the kinds of new competencies that are required to navigate the complexity that surrounds us. So what that has meant for us is that we've had to think about actually changing the very basis of education itself. And if you think back to the Renaissance, one of the generative impulses that created the Renaissance was a change in Florence in the educational system, where the city literally took the decision to shift the basis of education in Florence at the beginning of the 15th century away from the church and the Bible to the Greco-Roman civilization and what they called civic humanism. And it was that shift of the tectonic plates, literally, of how they conceived learning to be, that ignited the fires of the Renaissance. Because when you change the fundamental foundations of learning, you change the world because you change young people's minds. So what Ubiquity is doing in the first instance is shifting the basis of education away from an exclusive reliance on scientific materialism to what we're calling the living universe and an integral framework where everything that comprises the human being is taken in its totality, the interior realms, the exterior realms, the personal, the collective, and bringing them all together so that what gets activated through our integral learning system are all the intelligence of the young person, not just the analytical, but also the emotional, not just the mathematical, but also the social, the spiritual, the artistic, because we believe that if you activate all the different intelligences in an integral way, you enable the student to really energize and to animate their highest potential. So that's the essence of what Ubiquity is seeking to do. We're also very mindful that the emerging generation of young people, the millennials, and behind them, what they call the Gen Z, the generation emerging now, younger than the millennial generation, are the first generations literally in history that's been completely digital. So Ubiquity's designed, our learning platform assumes a digital online capacity, because that, in our view, is going to be the cornerstone of the new kind of education. And Peter Merry will say much more about all of these things. But I would like to emphasize just two other points before turning it over to him. And that is that in addition to being integral and modular so that the students can get what they want, when they want, so they can come into Ubiquity and just take a course or just take a certificate, or they can take courses toward degrees. So whatever the student needs in terms of just-in-time education is what Ubiquity is designed to provide. We've also made it globally affordable. We believe that students should not go into debt to pay for their schooling. They should be able to pay for their schooling with a part-time job. And so because we're globally affordable, we're finding now partners literally all over the world that are looking for transformational education, that are looking for an education that will enable, as we say, for the students to play the game, but also to change the game, to be able to deal with competency and professionalism in a real world of competition and complexity, but also because they've been working on their interior realms, they will be able to engage with creativity, with collaboration, with resilience, with flexibility, engaging in global thinking and global problem solving and global team building. Those are the kinds of new competencies that we believe should characterize the education of the future. And finally, we believe that students need to be actively engaged in their world. So for us, politics and social action is not something about which we believe that the university should be neutral. We believe that the world is pressing in upon us, quite literally, most specifically due to the ravages and the increasing devastation of climate change and a range of other global issues that are getting more acute and in many cases actually metastasizing together, so that history's entered what Irvin Laszlo would call the chaos zone. And how young people now prepare themselves, how learners of all ages prepare themselves to navigate skillfully through the world that is coming, and not only to navigate, but to actually thrive in a spirit of collaborative creativity with their peers as they engage in exercises that animate their passion for the kinds of gifts they want to bring into the world. That's what Ubiquity's been founded to provide. That is what our learning system is designed to activate. And we are looking, and indeed, Paula, we are very grateful that you and Bob and Diane have interacted through what we were developing there in Tamara, which has been a very important academic partner for us. And we look forward to partnering with you and Evora University to see how we can make available to you the kind of education and the kind of transformational learning that we have been developing, and also to be able to receive from you the kind of educational processes and courses that you would like to offer to us and to co-develop together, so that we can provide to Evora both learning opportunities, a technology platform, if that is what is necessary, and begin through this meeting and Bob's presence there and some of the discussions that we'll be having over the next weeks and months, a partnership that will enable both Evora and Ubiquity to creatively collaborate as we seek to bring transformational education to the world, and also there in Portugal. So I'll end my remarks here and turn it over to Peter, but I just want to thank all of you for being present. Paula, thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to establishing the kind of relationship that will be a collaborative and mutually beneficial in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And thank you also, Paula, for making this happen. We've kind of known each other via Facebook and having met once, I think, in Budapest for a while. So it's great to actually see you in this context of really this amazing historical place you're in as well, and how this ancient hall that you're sitting in now is combining to meet the new world of technology and online. It's very exciting to see the possibilities that might emerge from that. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail around the kind of things that Jim talked about. And we'll share my screen for that. Hopefully this will work okay, so that you can just follow some images as well. Is that working okay, Bob?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Peter.
Okay, great. So as Jim said, framing a whole new kind of education for a whole new kind of world. So that whole new kind of world is critical. Because as he said, it's the complexity of the issues that are now all interlocking that have put ourselves in a situation of complexity and speed of change that we've never had to face before as humanity. So the question is, how do we design an educational system that equips people to deal with this kind of complexity? This image came originally out of The New Scientist, And it was actually the only image in Dan Brown's new book, The Inferno. Otherwise, it was all words, but this image was, I noted, had kind of found its way into his book as well. So it's been spread around the world, but it really shows how the speed and intensity of change is increased over time, and that the kind of world we're in right now is radically different to the kind of world in which our educational systems originally were developed. So how do we adapt and evolve them to fit the life conditions, essentially, that we're in? That was really the design question, I guess, that lies behind Ubiquity. As we explored that, we found that actually we weren't the only ones asking these kind of questions. Surprise, surprise. People were pointing out, Forbes pointing out that education was operating highly inefficiently. That's Khan Academy being profiled on the front page of Forbes. It was, I think, December 2012. IBM interviews a large number of CEOs every couple of years to see what's going on, and they were talking about hypercomplexity. What does that mean? Hypercomplexity means these people don't have a clue how to navigate this reality. It's not just complex, they're calling it hypercomplex. They don't have a definition for it. It just means very, very, very complex. And they're saying that currently higher education isn't giving them the kind of students they need to be able to navigate that effectively. And McKinsey also looking into education. Students are picking the same thing up. They're experiencing a world around them, and they're finding a misfit between that world and the kind of education that they're getting. So there's a need, a big unmet need out there for the development of education into a new form that's more adequate for the current life conditions we're in. These are the kind of skills that came out of the IBM studies that were most needed. Like at the top: collaboration, communication, creativity, flexibility, systems thinking, critical thinking. All things, if you look at those, they're not things you're going to develop purely through a cognitive learning experience. It has to take into account the whole person, for you to be effective in your collaboration and relationship with others, effective communication, creativity. All of these require things that they're not getting, particularly out of the business schools. And if we look at the generations now who are coming into higher education, Jim identified a number of their qualities and what it is that drives them. But they're really, people have often said they're egotistical in the millennial generation. Well, maybe to some extent in its shadow side, but the other extent, they're really clear on what they need to be able to get into the world today. They say to us, we need to work out how we can make a living and making a difference. We're not interested in going into, the big companies and things. We want to know, how can we really get in there and make a difference, because we see that there's challenges in the world, and we want to be entrepreneurial in that. And at the same time, globally, there's a massive gap in terms of accessibility. So literally tens of millions of students a year who are qualified to go into higher education globally can't get in because they either don't have the money or there's not the infrastructure to get in. So they drop back down, whereas they could be moving forward through the education system. So even when we were in Sri Lanka talking to the Secretary of State for Education, they were saying we have 250,000 kids a year in that category, who are qualified to go to higher education, could be going in, but can't get in for economic reasons, for infrastructural reasons. They said you can start tomorrow if you're providing this kind of education. So the way we've gone about this is thinking, all right, if this is the context, what kind of an education is needed? What kind of competencies are needed to be able to equip people for these life conditions? This is inspired, the 4 quadrants here, inspired by Ken Wilber's work, who I know Paula is certainly familiar with, and maybe some of the other people there. But essentially, taking into account both the development of the inner qualities of the individual, as well as professional expertise. So not one or the other, but the combination. And at the same time, the qualities that are needed to develop resilient and creative relationships for collaboration with each other, but also the tools to be able to implement them into the structures and systems that we need. When I did my master's degree at Edinburgh University in human ecology, I remember our professor saying, "I don't want you leaving here as rebels without a clue." He said, you need to be able to engage the current system. So we did a mini MBA, for example, as part of it, just to learn, you know, the basics of how you keep books, the basic financial skills and things as well. So we found there's a lot of interest out there for this combination between liberal arts on the one hand and vocational training on the other, people who have specific skills but also want to really, you know, bring their own development and their interior dimensions into the world. So this is how we translated that idea basically into our pedagogical design. Essentially, there are three core elements to the Ubiquity learning experience. Academic study, obviously the stuff to learn. We want people to understand how the current world works, at the same time bring a critical mind to it and bring new paradigm thinking into the study as well. And then self-mastery, so the development of people's interior qualities, because we know that the quality of impact that one makes in the world is directly related to the quality of the person as we show up. So you can't differentiate out, you know, how positive your impact is in the world with how you show up as an individual. And that's all to do with our interior development, our self-mastery. And at the same time, as Jim said, we want people working on real projects. So that's what we've called our missions. Where we have people collaborating together creatively to either create new businesses, new social projects, but something that's going to make a real impact in the world, so that they're getting constant feedback between what the world needs, what development. Because we all know, you know, you learn the most about yourself when you try to do something in the world, then you get a mirror back to yourself. So these three interlock with each other. You know, what do you need to know to make the impact you feel called to make? And what do you need to develop in yourself to be effective? And of course, that self-development is an ongoing, never-ending process to get people into that dimension, so that we're holding that the whole time, that the way I show up is directly related to the impact I make. So if you look just concretely, for example, at MBA programs, so we developed an MBA program, and you can compare the different kinds of courses that we're offering compared to traditional MBAs. So the traditional MBAs ones over on the one side, and some of the core courses that we've developed over on the other. And when our distribution partners, for example, look at these, they're kind of, well, that's exactly what our students are calling for. A lot more of that than the kind of dry, just finance courses or operations courses. It's got to be given a context and some values to it, because we pretend that, say, corporate finance is values neutral, but we know it's not. So how do we actually make sure that people are bringing a critical mind, a questioning mind to the work that they're doing, even if it's on subjects that you would need, for example, to successfully run a business? I've mentioned distribution partners. What we're finding is there's a lot of interest from people across the world to actually take these programs and distribute out to networks that they're a part of. So on the one hand, developing transformational content, and on the other hand, finding channels that go out into the mainstream for people who are wanting to get access to higher education, some of whom, for example, are wanting to complete a degree, either having done a certain level of vocational or college training, and who with a final year, could get to a BA level, for example. Or, increasingly, I'm talking to young people who've gone into higher education and dropped out because they're so disillusioned with it, but who have got some credits that they'd like to bring into Ubiquity, but then complete it with the Ubiquity kind of courses and content. Now, more recently, I've really been referring to Ubiquity as digital first as opposed to online, because clearly the in-person aspect is very important. You could, in theory, do a large amount of a program at Ubiquity Online, although your mission, your hands-on change project, would have to be really in the world with others. But I think the most powerful learning experience is going to be a combination where you've got partners on the ground, campuses, for example, like Evora, where people have the benefit of a local community of the in-person interactions and a context where you can actually work together on things, combined with the global community online of change makers from a variety of cultures and backgrounds who you could team up with to work on your projects with, or to apply your projects to different contexts, and the diversity of courses that are there online. So for example, we have partners who are going to have people take a Ubiquity course online, and then they're going to run tutorial sessions alongside it to help people, one, translate, make sure they've understood the concepts, translate them to their own language and cultural context, and at the same time think through the application of that content to their own realities. So it's what's being called a blended learning, or certainly over here often about flipping the classroom, where the content is often delivered online, but where the in-person time is used for what in-person time is good at, which is namely interpersonal interaction, really working through the material and coming to embody its implications. We've also partnered up with a lot of organizations who have projects going on locally and who would love to host Ubiquity students for their missions, for their hands-on change projects, where they could come and help develop an intentional community or a social enterprise in different parts of the world. So as part of their studies, the students have to engage in some kind of project like that, where they're really on the ground working on something that's going to contribute socially and ecologically to the future. And the bigger picture, you know, when you zoom out, the kind of context we're beginning to see here is, on the one hand, Ubiquity is a learning and training platform where you can develop the competencies, etc., that you need. The combination of the self-mastery with the content, study content. On the other hand, people are developing their projects, developing their social innovation projects. So you've got a combination of skills development, quality development, ongoing projects. And you can see a possible interface there between a career services program, you know, where people are coming to look for students who are working in certain domains, who have demonstrated certain qualities. And then connected into that is this global alliance or network of people and campuses on the ground. And you can see also how that's going to tie in with, you know, so how are we going to get these social innovation projects funded? Well, with the innovation around crowdfunding, you could see how a global network could end up supporting a lot of student projects, and then crowdsourcing the different skills and competencies from the community to help you develop the projects that you're working on. And with a little peek into the future, but I think not too far into the future, is the whole context of, you know, what is going to be the next step for online learning? Because we've kind of reached the limit of the 2D screen, essentially. What you're seeing now is our campus in Second Life, our virtual reality campus, actually our admissions office here. And then down in the front of the picture is the black kind of ski goggles, which some of you may have heard of. This is the particular example is the Oculus Rift virtual reality goggles. And this we see kind of coming online probably in a couple of years' time. And I've been on one of these. They're essentially, you put these goggles on, and for those who don't know it, this world disappears and you really enter another world. So as you turn your head around, you're looking at the other worlds. And I went on a roller coaster ride in one of these. And I tell you, your whole body mind believes you're there. And I suddenly realized, because I have a background in experiential learning and theater, the possibilities for taking online learning into experiential learning using immersive virtual reality technology. Because a 2D screen is one thing, but I tell you, the 3D immersive experience is a completely different thing. And once we get that going, and it's going to start taking off next year in the gaming industry, probably in spring, as I know a number of the new technologies are coming out, it'll revolutionize the possibilities for online learning. So we're doing some prototyping, exploring development of that at the moment. It'll be a little further down the line, but I think it's going to be key to where this all ends up, because we know, and the research shows, that the more experiential the learning is, the more it sticks. So here's a possibility not to replace in-person, but to get much closer to it through the online experience than we've been able to do so far. And this is just, obviously one step at a time. We get really excited by the virtual reality piece. Initially, in the first phase, we're offering some courses, having some partners on the platform who are offering courses. In the second phase, we'll really build out the platform so that any partner can bring content onto the Ubiquity platform and their community onto the platform as well. And then anybody else who is on the Ubiquity platform can start to take that content. So imagine that Evora brings a course onto the platform and also a community of their own students who are going to take that course. Once that course is on the platform, any of the other students who are on the platform could start to take the course, which is very interesting, because it means that great content, which until now has been kept localized, suddenly becomes available globally. And it also creates an economic engine for some of these partners, because of course the moment that thousands of students globally start to take your course, there's a revenue stream available there. At the same time, the community that, for example, comes on from Evora could start taking courses that are being offered by others from the platform, assuming that the faculty locally, was able to say, yeah, we agree that this course contributes to, the development of this particular stream in the program, combined probably with some in-person tutorials and things. And then this third phase here is a pointer towards the kind of immersive virtual reality context that I was talking about just now. So quickly then, what does it really mean for the student? What's the student experience on the current platform until we get into the immersive thing? So when we get there, there's going to be great people. We're trying to build essentially a kind of Facebook for change makers. So people who are really trying to engage the world and make a difference. It'll be a place you can come find each other, learn together, develop projects together. The content is going to be relevant to the world. It's going to be new paradigm thinking. It's going to give you access to thinkers who are really on the leading edge of what's going on at the moment. And then within the self-mastery context, there'll be the ability to explore different aspects of yourself through a really interesting holistic profiling system that a partner of ours is developing, that helps you to get a mirror back in terms of, okay, where are my strengths? What else would I want to work on? How do I consciously engage in my self-mastery process during my time at Ubiquity and beyond? It has the possibility to share your thoughts and ideas with others. You would have your bio like you would on Facebook. You'd have your own blog so that you can share your posts and your assignments you can do via your blog and choose who you want to share them with. And then the kind of ease of integration of, for example, your Facebook profile, being able to put updates in a search engine to find your way around easily, and maybe some fun around a leaderboard in terms of, at the moment, the platform's designed to give you points in it every time you interact in a constructive way on the platform. So, for example, if you like somebody's post, if you comment on a blog, if you post a blog, if you add a friend, that'll add to your point. So a bit of what we call gamification into the system to stimulate people to hang around and be part of the community. That's really the key thing, to design the platform as a community rather than just as a content delivery system. So as you go through courses, all the different competencies that you develop will be rewarded with different levels of badges. Badges which you can put on your LinkedIn profile, for example, or collect towards course credits, et cetera, et cetera. So thinking about, when millions, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Jane McGonigal's work on gaming, but it's very interesting. She basically asks the question, what is it that enables people to game for hours? What keeps them engaged in that? What's the design secret for that? As she says here, when we do hard work, we care about priming our minds for happiness. So how do we take those design principles and help design a learning and innovation experience so that that energy that goes into often mindless games can actually be applied to dealing with the major challenges that we're facing together? And we're right at the early stages of that. Obviously, the virtual reality is going to add a lot more to that, but really starting to think through, how do you keep people engaged in an online platform and in the projects that they're involved in? A lot of collaborative assignments. So we're really trying to build in the intercultural collaboration so people learn through interaction with others. And you can have collaborative blogs, for example. The students, when they're working on a course, they all work together in pods, which are small groups of 8 to 12 people, which is where the more intense exchange goes on. And ultimately, the idea is to pull it all together and give people that sense of community, where you've got your change maker profile, you've got the social functionality, you've got a professional portfolio, the ability for people to come in and find students to work on projects, and of course the content provision. So just to give you a taste of, these are the kind of 10 courses that we've been talking to people about, in which we have a number of them already ready to go onto the platform, and others that we have the course program developed, syllabus. For example, Paul Ray, who's a very well-known sociologist, on global forces, Dwayne Elgin on the living universe. I've worked on a leadership course, a course that really looks fundamentally at the questions of finance and trade. A very innovative course with a young man, Andrew Kornfeld, just completed his degree in the US, extremely bright, looking at the relationship between science and the mind. Critical thinking course, a new approach to mathematics even, and then Ken Wilber, who we've mentioned before, course on creativity, and one looking at stakeholder impact. So as we do our projects, how do we make sure we take into account all the different stakeholders that are involved? So that's an example of some of the BA courses that we're going to be starting with. And they lead to a number of certificates. So you can combine courses into certificates, and you'll see the themes there reflect kind of what we've been talking about: the thriving in transition, engaging hypercomplexity, etc. We saw that one earlier. And so where are we now? Well, we're preparing to launch the first programs in January. And as Paula said, the first BA course we'll have up there is the one on transformational leadership that we've tested through our alpha and beta tests. But we'll also have 2 programs that are focused particularly on your change projects. The transform one is more radical. It's more focused on systemic change projects that maybe try to create the new system, whereas the impact social entrepreneurship pathway is more, how do you engage the current system by creating a social enterprise that's going to thrive while making a difference at the same time. And we're also hoping to get the critical thinking course up for January as well, that we're developing in collaboration with the Institute for Critical Thinking. So that's basically where we are. Thanks for your attention. I know it's really hard kind of to watch a screen and listen, probably also at this time of the afternoon over there. So thanks for your attention, and back to you, Bob and Paula.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. So I guess now we can open the floor for questions and answers. So we might like to, if you have questions, if you want to ask questions, I can slide it if you like, or you can ask directly. So if you want to go deeper into what you just heard, would you like to know?
Well, yes, I have a question.
Can you hear Peter okay?
I'm another Peter. I have one question. I sometimes say, and most of the time think, that the brain, our brain, is an extension of our hands. And it works the other way too. But my son is now 19 years old, and he has spent most of that year being a dishwasher. He's a smart kid, and I think he's learned more doing a year of dishwashing than he has done in 6 years of education. So, is there any exercise for the hands, which I imagine it will be on in the localities where do things that comes to the fore? You know, I'm concerned about that. I think the hands are exceedingly important for the stimulation of the brain.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really, you know, when I showed those 3 overlapping circles, 1/3 is study, 1/3 self-mastery, and 1/3 the missions, the hands-on change projects. I mean, literally hands-on. You know, they're meant to be the places where people are really doing things in practice. So absolutely, I couldn't agree more. You know, it's been a real interesting design question for us. How do we combine the development of a scalable, affordable education with real transformational experience on the ground? And it's finding these network of campuses and partners who actually have places on the ground to work with, and these different social projects that is really giving us the possibility to do that combination. But absolutely, yeah, it's very important for us to have people engaged hands-on. Did you want to comment, Jim?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point around the hands activating the brain. And I would add another dimension to it, and that is just simply art. You know, when the hands are doing something artistic. And the university that gave rise to Ubiquity, Wisdom University, had a pedagogical system whereby we balanced 3 hours of intense intellectual work in terms of lectures in the morning with an equal amount of time, 3 hours in the afternoon around expressive art. So people use their heads in the morning, and they use their hands in the afternoons to express themselves artistically. So that commitment and that synergy, I would say, between the artistic and the intellectual is embedded in the tripartite curricular design that Peter created for us between the academic study, the self-mastery, and the real-life missions. So that's what we believe. If you bring all 3 of those aspects together, you not only activate the head and the hands, but the heart and the viscera and the social and spiritual intelligences of the student. So thank you for your comment. It's fundamental to the kind of learning that animates the whole person.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, Jim, you know, for the assignments that students are asked to do during their courses, we call them creative assignments, and we really encourage faculty to ask the students to come up with assignments to use multiple different media forms. And it could be an artistic assignment. Ideally, it's not just a written piece, although it could be. We really want them to try to, you know, encourage people to express themselves using the different faculties.
All this makes me think of another thing. Is in my personal experience, I have learned an enormous amount of things from analphabetics. People that don't know how to read or write. They have an unbelievable memory. They hear something one time, they'll never forget it. On the one hand, and on the other hand, these kind of people are not very likely to function within a system that you are building like that. You know, do you have a possibility to reach out to, let's say, individuals or like off the beaten track situations where, you know, people can get exposed to such a kind of information?
Well, I mean, what I would add to that then is that a lot of the content, we've tried to have the content delivered in various different media forms. So people can listen to it as audio, or they could watch a video, or they can, review a presentation or read an article about it. So we know that different people have different learning preferences and different learning styles. And so we really coach the faculty in coming up with resources that help people to find the best form that suits their learning preference. I mean, in that vein.
Yeah, I would add the following note, and thank you for making that point, because I think what you just said, sir, is probably the most fundamental observation that I would make as an educator about the emerging generation of millennials and Gen Zs. They're all out of the box. And I've had a saying for some years, the Wisdom University was looking for 13s in a 12 world. All of our students, or most of our students, are people who are rather unusual in one way or another. And we took that observation about the distinctive qualities of the young people emerging and built an entire university system around it. And let me take a minute to explain what we mean by that. If you think of the conventional universities, the student goes in the first year, takes a bunch of courses that are assigned to them as general education requirements, and they basically, do what they're told for 3 or 4 years, and they get a degree at the other end. But increasingly, students are understanding that just because you have a degree doesn't mean you're going to get a job. So the promise of education is breaking down. And so the challenge of education is to design a system that is student-centric rather than degree-centric and institution-centric. So that's what we've done with Ubiquity. And that's what I was indicating, and I think Peter was indicating as well, in terms of us being completely modular. So our promise to the student is not about a degree at all. Our promise to the student is that if you come to Ubiquity, we're going to animate your multiple intelligences. We're going to give you the kind of choice that you need to make the decisions as to what you want. You may come into Ubiquity and you only want a certificate in leadership or in collaborative creativity or social innovation and entrepreneurship, because more and more companies, particularly here in the United States and Silicon Valley, where I am, are saying that certificates now are as important as degrees. And if you've gone into your LinkedIn profile recently, over the last couple of months, LinkedIn now makes it possible for you to identify and list your certificates for the first time, along with your professional degrees that you got from universities. So increasingly, young people are out of the box, not as an exception, but the norm. And in fact, we take our modular education one step further. We say to our students, if you have had a deeply meaningful experience in your life, you can write it up, submit it to Ubiquity for credit. And so that completely turns the educational system really on its head, so that the students are no longer coming into an educational system, an institution, trying to get sort of that degree, that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But it's a system that as Peter indicated in our website, we have all these little badges. So almost anything you do on the learning platform as a Ubiquity student, you get credit for, you get badges for. So you can cut and paste and literally design your own educational pathway. And that is an extraordinary challenge for an institution to focus on the particular student. But we believe that that is the learning of the future. And when you add augmented reality and gamification in a totally immersive learning environment, you begin to have an institution that the students can enter and shape their learning in virtually any direction they want to go. Because the pressures of hypercomplexity, the pressures of cross-cultural exchange are so intense now that the traditional ways that culture has of defining young people as they emerge in the culture are breaking down. Just the fact of this phone call that I'm talking to you from California and Peter from the Netherlands, and you're there in Portugal, and Diane is in North Africa, is an indication of the way traditional forms of almost every kind of human interaction are not only breaking down, but reinventing. And so therefore, a learning institution, an academic institution, is challenged as never before to turn itself upside down, make the student the center, and design the entire learning system around what is going to empower that particular student to become who they really want to be. So I thank you for making that point, because I believe it's probably the most fundamental issue with which educators, not only in the United States and Europe, but worldwide, are beginning to address. And if I could make one more comment, at the heart of what the students are looking for universally is that vocational liberal arts synthesis. How do I prepare myself with a real profession that is going to give me the navigation skills in a highly competitive job market? I mean, there in Portugal, your unemployment rate is sky high. It's also true in Spain. It's true in countries all over the world. And so a student knows that when they go to college, they've got to somehow get the skills they need for being professionally and gainfully employed as an adult. But that's not all they need. They also need the social intelligence, the emotional intelligence, the artistic intelligence, the intelligence of the hands, the intelligence of the heart, the intelligence of the soul. Because in an increasingly hyper-complex world, events are going to emerge out of any sector instantaneously. Just like the refugees did just hitting Europe. All of a sudden, it was a crisis. All of a sudden, Hungary started to shut down, and Croatia and Germany, all of Europe in a space of a few weeks was challenged as hasn't been done since the Second World War, about how they were going to deal with an escalating number of migrants who weren't going to take no for an answer. So you have to have real resilience to deal with those kinds of challenges coming unexpectedly in overwhelming ways, as we human beings have ever had before. So the capacity of an institution to empower an individual internally as well as externally is literally what we say in America, the $64,000 question. And we haven't cracked the whole code. We haven't really developed the total answer, but we believe we've at least got the right questions. And we're starting in partnership with institutions around the world to begin to fashion a student-centric, modular, integral kind of education that will allow each and every student the kind of learning that they need. So I'm sorry if I took a little while to answer your question, but it was an extraordinary important point that you made. So I just wanted to honor it by indicating how Ubiquity is really grappling with a student-centric institution.
Thank you very much.
More questions? Would you like to ask? use this opportunity to ask questions about more details into what you want to say.
Yes, I would like to ask a question about the feedback of the students that already finished. How are they integrating in the market? What is the feedback of the students that already finished their courses?
Well, the online programs we're not starting till January, but we've tried the program out in a beta test. And while you always have bugs and things, because that's the nature of a beta test, people were very enthusiastic about the content of the programs and the support of the course facilitators. Because what's really important in the online context is that you have a real person who's supporting you in your learning experience, and so they really appreciated that. I don't know if you were particularly interested in that, in the kind of digital first experience. I mean, Jim could say more about the students from the Wisdom School and that particular pedagogy, because that's been running for quite a few years now. So maybe Jim can comment on that. But we will see in January, when we first start the first programs, exactly how the students respond. And of course, we'll be learning probably even more than they will in that first year, as we gather the feedback and try to improve the learning experience for them. Yeah.
I was asking that because you are trying to change education, but I was trying to see if in the market what is happening.
I mean, so far the interest has been extremely high, and we will, as I said, we'll see, how people actually respond come January. But Jim, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, if I understood your question correctly, ma'am, I would say that I just, in the last month, I've been in Australia and I've been in Great Britain talking to academic partners. And I would say that what the market is saying worldwide is that, first, that the educational system as it's currently operating and designed is not working to prepare the young people. So universally, educators and students and the global corporations are in agreement that education needs radical transformation. Secondly, what is beginning to emerge in Europe and also in South and East Asia is a recognition that the focus of education around technology, mathematics, engineering, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM, which has been virtually the exclusive focus for most of education over the last 30 to 40 years, is no longer working. And it's creating what they call silo effects. And in fact, when I was in Australia, a headline article in the major newspaper there was talking about the fact that education had to radically change and to include liberal arts. So Singapore, for example, has just entered into an agreement with Yale University to set up a liberal arts campus there in Singapore. There's no country in the world that has taken STEM education to a higher level than Singapore. It was all about engineering, mathematics, science, and technology. But that's what makes Jack a dull boy, as they say, and unable to really compete in an increasingly hyper-complex global situation. So we've been negotiating, and we've actually finalized agreements with educational networks that are probably representing upwards of 700 schools in over 75 countries around the world, to begin to design, as Peter was indicating in one of his slides, what we're calling vocational liberal arts packages, whereby the vocational schools that conduct in-person education partner with Ubiquity to provide digital liberal arts capstone courses, so that the students simultaneously take the vocational courses toward diplomas and advanced diplomas in person in local schools around the world, while they take our online digital courses. So by the time they get their diploma in their vocational, professional preparation, they also get a BA degree online through Ubiquity. And what's exciting educators as they're interacting with Ubiquity is to do something that education, it's unprecedented. To simultaneously have what we're calling in-person online education, which allows the in-person, the online, it allows the local and the global. It's globally affordable, so students all over the world are paying essentially the same low tuition, and people are learning how to play the game and also to change the game. And I think it's that holistic package that Ubiquity is seeking with partners to bring into the educational marketplace that is really attracting so much interest. And we'll see as we actually roll out starting in January with students literally worldwide, how a global classroom that's also local is going to work out. To our knowledge, nothing like this has ever really been done before. So as I say to people, you know, we're not an iPhone, but we're a really cool Macintosh. You remember the first Apple computer that Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak brought it into the market. It was pretty clunky, but it was totally out of the box, and it had the genius of Apple computers. They embedded everything in that Macintosh that was eventually to become a MacBook Pro and an iPhone. So I think that's the excitement of partnering with a university like Evora that is also trying to reinvent education in a transformational world. The real purpose of this call is not only to exchange information, but to establish a partnership so that we can together really begin a process of being learning communities together as we seek to bring our education into the future. So we would love to be able to partner with you. We know that Bob's having discussion with you to join the Tamara course because of a real alignment in philosophy and ethos and commitment to social change. Well, we want, you know, that's the first thing we're doing with Tamara. And we would love not only students, but faculty and maybe the leadership of the university there to take that course together in January so we all learn together how really this design wants to morph, wants to change, to become more resilient, more adaptive, and therefore more empowering to individual students. Because what we're trying to do has never been done before. To go back to the gentleman's previous point, we know for several thousand years how you take students, bring them into a classroom, and socialize them so that they all become homogenous. That's been the purpose of education for several thousand years. And all of a sudden, the world is entering hypercomplexity. The students are no longer in the box. More and more students are out of the box. They're 13s in a 12 world. So then how do you redesign the educational system itself so it's custom designed for each and every student? And you're also doing it not just with just Portuguese students coming into the classroom, but Portuguese, Ethiopian, Thai, Peruvian, American, Dutch students, all of whom are culturally conditioned differently, but coming in all unique in their own ways. How do you design a learning system that really engages them at the level of collaborative creativity, but also individual differentiation? Now, we know that's the challenge. And we believe we've come up with the beginnings of again, a Macintosh-like design for how you really bring these complexities together. And we're looking for the kinds of partnerships like we're beginning with Tamara, and hopefully with Evora and others that we've been negotiating. If you go on our website, probably at the end of this next week, Peter's just finished a PDF file. We've got 30 or 40 partners all over the world, either working with us academically or bringing in certain content. Like, for example, Tamara is a new course, the Transform course. There are partners that are really cracking important codes in terms of just how you learn. If you're going to have English as the common language, how do you make English as easy as possible? One of the paradoxes of English. It's one of the simplest, easiest languages to learn verbally, but it's one of the most challenging languages to read and to write. So how do you work with students to enable them to really master the English language while they do their studies? There's all kinds of companies that are making extraordinary breakthroughs because English is increasing around the world radically, particularly in Asia and Africa, as the lingua franca. How do you begin to make breakthroughs in tutorials? We're partnering with a company, for example, called Exemplars, that has developed an online tutorial system so that any student, anywhere, 24/7, can ask a question into the system. You know, what is the Pythagorean theorem? And you're on your way to your exam, and there's a tutor somewhere that will instantly connect with you and give you the mentoring you need for the answers you're seeking in the moment, 24/7. Now, something like that wasn't even conceivable even 18 to 24 months ago. It's now coming into the market. And again, it's all student-centric. So the real issue is to hold these challenges together as we enter the market, because we believe we've got I would say, the contextual market feedback. And now we have to engage over the next several years in fine-tuning our system in collaboration with our partners so that the students become more and more addressed and animated, both collectively and individually. So very important question that you're asking.
Thank you very much. I think the idea of partnership is very good for change education.
Do you have another question, please?
Just about the costs. How expensive do you think this kind of course are in comparison with the traditional university?
Well,
The idea why, or just are in the very beginning of the process?
well, as I indicated, we want schooling, higher education to be globally affordable with basically a part-time job. You know, when I went to school, in the late 60s, early 70s, it never occurred to any of us that there was any debt involved in going to school. It didn't come up even as a possibility. To go to UC Berkeley costs $250 a year. Today, in 2015, it costs $45,000 a year. So in England, in many countries in Europe, there are exceptions like in Germany and in Denmark and Scandinavia where education is still free. That may be the case in Portugal. But in countries all over the world, education is losing government subsidies, being privatized, and educational costs are radically increasing literally worldwide. So the challenge is to make it globally affordable. So what we did, our courses are $300 for a 3-unit course. Now, if you assume that you need to take 40 courses for a BA degree, which is pretty standard, 32 to 40 courses. We've pegged it at 40 courses. That means you can get a full BA degree for $12,000, or about, I would say, 9,000 euros at today's exchange rate. Well, paying 9,000 euros over 3 to 4 years is affordable in virtually every country in Europe. Certainly it's affordable in the United States and I would say the developed world. We have a policy that actually we came to out of our partnership with Tamara to say that in countries that are, I would say, economically challenged, so that even paying $300 a course is an issue, like, for example, it is in Ethiopia. We've developed, in fact, this was Bob and Diane's idea, to develop what we're calling shared tuition. So that if a student can't pay the $300 a course, he or she can go out and get a couple friends, and they can divide that tuition as well. Each one of them have to apply to Ubiquity. They have to show that they're capable of taking the course you know, operating at a university level. But then they can break it up into $100 chunks. So if you could only afford 100 and your friend could only afford 200, you could come together and share the tuition, but still pay the $300 and enter into Ubiquity University. So we believe we've cracked a very important code, which allows a global tuition that's the same for students all over the world and can be divided up and shared for students that come from economically challenged communities or countries that require that level of support. We want education to be affordable. We want transformational education to be everywhere in the world. We're aspiring to be the largest university in the world by 2025 because we believe that going back to Peter's first slide of "you are here," where all the trends are going up and everybody's in that upper right-hand corner. If we are in that world of hypercomplexity, and we're also in a world where our governments don't seem to get the gravity of our crisis, we believe that Einstein is right, or was right, that the consciousness that produced the problem can't solve the problem. And what we need is to change consciousness at a global level, at a mass level among the young people. And that's why we've changed the very foundations of learning at Ubiquity, away from conventional scientific reductionists to integral and a living universe. Because we want to get education, transformational education out there as extensively, as affordably as we can. Because our central mission in an increasingly hyper-complex world that's getting more and more dangerous is to change consciousness globally at a mass level as quickly as we can. And what we learned from the Renaissance is that the modern world was ignited by a fundamental change in Florentine education. That's what ignited it. And so Ubiquity with Evora, with Tamara, with institutions around the world that believe that we need to transform education as we know it, are coming together. And at the heart of it is global affordability. So students worldwide can participate in this new form of education.
Yes, I have a curiosity. Here we've been talking, I am curious about Diane being in Tunisia. I imagine that her surroundings are not exactly the same as ours or yours. I'm just, basically this is I would like could you satisfy my curiosity by, can I ask Diane to give us a little description of where you are and how it is to be there in relation to beginning university? The universe is my university.
Whoops.
Are you muted, Diane? Oh, there you are.
Yes, I'm actually visiting with a Palestinian friend of mine. His Palestinian doctor brother who lives here in one of the towns along the coast in Tunisia. And we are actually visiting around to various places and people who are excited about Ubiquity as well. So it's a different scene. Most people here are Muslim, and Eid is coming up. The end of the Hajj is coming up in a few days. So outside my street, which is the main street in my town here, yesterday there were a whole flock of sheep which were being bought for sacrificing for Eid, which is a celebration they do here. And you know, it's a different scene, and yet yesterday we met two young men who were touring us around an ancient village that was up in the mountains here. They both speak English, and they both were interested about being Ubiquity students. You know, it's exciting to me. And I was in Tamira with Bob and Paula last month, and there were students there from Togo and Benin and Brazil and Costa Rica and Colombia, and a woman from Korea. And, you know, in some ways, we're all very connected. Everybody has a cell phone. Even though my connection has gone off 3 times while this conference has been going on today. But yeah, people everywhere are wanting to find their place in the world and their place to change the world, especially here.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, do you have some more questions, Elias, or the youngsters? Do you have questions for the future?
Sorry, all that.
And I might add that Peter will need to leave at the top of the hour in about 7 minutes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, I'm satisfied.
If you don't have further questions, no.
So I
Okay, that is my question. Maria?
Well, it was very interesting to be here. Thank you. Well, I think working out of the box means somehow link all the education cycle, the beginning at the basic until the university. And since the students arrive at the university, institutional or less institutional, after 12 years of study, at least here in Portugal, it means that a lot of work should be done also before they go to the university. And my question is about your experience dealing with the background of the students before they go to the university. Did you already have some experiences working with high school students, with more infant students? Well, that's my question. Thank you.
Well, I would say a number of people are working at different levels of the educational system. We've chosen higher education. One of our board members, Stephanie Pace Marshall, pioneered here in the United States in the late 60s, early 70s, transformational education at the high school level. and Rudolf Steiner and others 100 years ago or more, pioneered through the Waldorf schools education, K through 12, kindergarten through the end of high school. To the degree to which students are prepared for the kind of transformational education Ubiquity is seeking to provide, that would optimize their capacity to perform well. We're actually in conversation with the International Network of Waldorf High Schools because we believe that students coming out of the Waldorf K through 12 system would find Ubiquity, a perfect next learning system. And so probably over time, your point is extremely important. How do you take a young person 5, 6, 7 years old and beginning at a very young age, educate them in this new way of learning? So they're not educated in a conventional way till they're 18, and then they have a kind of cognitive dissonance when they get to Ubiquity University. But they're actually prepared and can take full advantage of what this new learning system is seeking to provide. That's one reason why we asked Stephanie Pace-Marshall to be on our board. She's a world recognized educator, and over time, certainly by 2020 or 2025, we hope to have the kind of partnerships in place that would create sort of feeder schools into the Ubiquity system with educational systems like Waldorf that are very deeply aligned with our philosophy and our goal of holistic education. But very good point. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there further questions that you ask the audience? Some more questions? No, very good.
Well, really, I have a question, because my question is so big that you speak the way of dealing with this high developed technology. I'm not yet prepared to face this global education, but I have a big support with Holon. And well, I could be already a grandmother, perhaps as you are already. Sorry, but I'm facing this with a very high expectation, and I will follow it very close. That's my good news for you, and thank you for everything. That's the high technology now facing my big new needs.
New challenges. Yeah, you are working with it.
Well, that makes me think. That makes me think that we need some of these young people, I see 18, 19 years old, to be our teachers.
Yes. So they are recruiting.
If you know of any, send them over.
Well, just to take a moment on that, the faculty that teaches our Science in the Mind course, one of our core courses, is 23 years old.
Right.
And he was a star student at the University of California at Santa Cruz. He started a club called Brain, Mind, Consciousness that became a campus sensation. He was invited to design a course that was so popular, it is now a regular course at UC Santa Cruz, and has attracted donations, so it's now an endowed course. and it's all around science and the mind. And so it's a transformational way of learning science, and he's 23 years old. And so there is no doubt that these young people coming up are obviously they're in their student phase, but many of them are teachers even though they're still students. And to be able to have an educational design that allows them to flourish is a matter of great pleasure to me as an educator, because these young kids coming up are really, really bright. So anyway, thank you so much, Paula, for this invitation, and thank you all for your attentiveness and your questions. They were, I just want to remark, each one of your questions was very important. And it brought out, I think, a very holistic dialogue. And so it's our hope that through Bob there, we can establish the beginnings of a partnership with Evora and see what we can do together even as early as January of next year, and how we can collaborate in the future, because I'm sure we'll learn very much from everything that you've developed so far. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Jim and Diane and Peter and Bob and all the audience. I think an applause for everybody that's part of this pioneering event. So it has been